it's as sharp as a butcher's cleaver. As one month slides into another, the mist lingering in the morning and the paths deep covered in brown and gold leaves, we get a sense of how quickly the days are passing by. And we feel the progression of the seasons with a visceral reality. And then the years are gone before we noticed. Just the smooth silver sea remains the same. Let's go in and make a cup of coffee and see if we can't find a biscuit somewhere to cheer ourselves up. Hello, my name is Peter John Cooper. In today's tale from the cliff edge, I'm going to remind you of those events from a few years ago. If we are prompted, we sometimes remember all those little fads and fancies that come and go, like hula hoops and frisbees, and sometimes we turf out such ephemeral matter. But sometimes their effects last in ways we don't understand. This week's tale is called The Year of the Dolphins. It was that year when everyone had a dolphin. I mean, you had to have a dolphin. I don't suppose the Sunday Times realised what it was starting when it published that article, Me and My Dolphin, by some now forgotten YouTube influencer who had somehow made it into the mainstream by appearing on Love Island or something like that. The accompanying photographs were very compelling, with pictures of her in her bikini frolicking in the surf with her pet cetacean. Now, after that, dolphins were everywhere. I first saw them arriving in the West Hill car park with the hardline surfers in their sprinters and microbuses, dolphins stowed on the roofs where their highly waxed longboards would have been previously. They would carry them down under their arms to their favourite area for surfing by the pier, and there they would ride the creatures backwards and forwards in the waves, in the monotonous, life-defying way that surfers have, always waiting for a wave, for the wave, and then urging the dolphin along and down, with the surfer occasionally just managing to stand upright on its back for a few seconds. I mean, I'm sure the dolphin loved that bit, but I wasn't aware that dolphins enjoyed the rest of the entirely tedious meditation between the waves. But later that season, I saw one or two surfer dudes sprinting further out from the surf and racing along parallel to the shore, balancing proudly, reins in one hand while waving to the crowds on the beach with the other. And after that, with 2 or 3 in hand and their rider a foot on each, leaping the waves and creating clouds of spray as they went. It was indeed a brave sight, and brought to mind the noble Greek myth of Arion fleeing the pirates while strumming his kithara. Kithara being a lyre, in case you thought otherwise. But I never really began questioning the dolphin craze until later, Families began arriving in the Durley Chine car park with 1 or 2 dolphins lashed to their roof racks in place of the inflatable unicorns and pink flamingos that had been the rage the year before. The children would frolic briefly with them in the low waves and then, in the way that these things were, would ignore them and go off to badger their parents for burgers and ice creams, while the dolphins themselves would lie drying out on the sand, squeaking pathetically, until Dad or Mum would cart the poor creature back up the beach and struggle them back onto the roof rack. And indeed, there were not a few examples of dolphins being abandoned on the beach altogether, or worse, shoved nose first into the recycling bins, as if there might be some additional uses for a full-grown dolphin carcass. And then there were the grim stories of swimmers being attacked and mauled by the apparently amicable creatures. I'm not a cetacean psychologist, but I think a lot of the problems stemmed from people not appreciating the dolphin mentality. Dolphins are innately social animals. Having been raised in exceptional circumstances, they divined that the family that owned them was their pod and would attack what they considered to be members of rival pods. Without proper socialising, they would consider themselves to be the alpha male or female and act according to instinct. And all this inevitably led to all sorts of pathological behaviours. Their owners would stand at the water's edge shouting and whistling, without the poor dolphin having the remotest idea what all this din meant, so carried on as instinct demanded. It was indeed the only fun they had in their lives, thrashing up and down, nipping the ankles of anyone else in the water. The owners would shrug and say, "Oh, look, he's only being friendly. Look, he's smiling." And indeed, he was. But then dolphins are always smiling, and I'm not sure that that smile doesn't conceal a great deal more going on inside. And then the tide turned, as it were. People became annoyed by the peace and quiet of the beach being disturbed by the dolphin behaviour and the noise of the owners calling ineffectually to them. But there was at first nothing they could do. It's a free country, isn't it? But the real hinge was when a 10-year-old girl called Tina Tonks began a campaign against the farming methods that were being used to produce these animals. I mean, it was nominally illegal to take them from the wild, but there was nothing to prevent unscrupulous breeders having a tank or two of breeding pairs out the back of their quite legitimate puppy farms that they were running. Tina's lisping appearances on morning TV and pictures of her standing on the cliff edge of the West Cliff Green holding a placard saying, "Let the dolphins swim free," led to a follow-up campaign by the Sunday Times in egregious hypocriticality, which showed blurry photographs of such farms, and even worse, photos of the dolphins themselves being kept in people's bathrooms and garden jacuzzis, with the owners quoted as saying, "We bought it for the kids at Christmas. We had no idea how big it would grow," and so on. The first half-hearted action the government took was to ban the keeping of dolphins and other sea mammals in tanks or baths shorter than the creature itself. But the campaign was gathering pace, and by the next spring it had grown with Tina's slogan, "Let the dolphins swim free," which, in retrospect, was badly considered because these were creatures bred and reared in captivity, and the pathologies were embedded in them. Too many people remembered the Free Willy campaign and realised that a cetacean raised in captivity was going to be impossible to integrate in the socially complex world of the wild dolphin. So while there were a few instances of families gathering on beaches for massed freeings, these tended to result in the rather pathetic sights and sounds of these intelligent creatures circling in the surf, calling and whistling in their bafflement of what was happening to them. It was a sad time all round, and was finally brought to an end when the idea of dolphin steaks became a popular dish in many London restaurants. But wait, there is meant to be a happy ending to this week's story. I can't leave it there. The fact is, though, that dolphins are intelligent, resourceful creatures. After some time, those that had been let loose in the bay were able to adapt in some way to their new environment. It is said that they found a small reef off the Dorset coast, where they were able to form their new community and start to think about what had befallen them. Their interactions with the human species had given them insights that never occurred to their pelagic relations. Ideas of competition and needless acquisition having now been revealed to them, they were able to avoid with stern warnings to younger dolphins of their dangers. But the idea of scientific understanding and rational thinking were something they would adopt. It is said they have been experimenting with, and given time could form technologies that would far outstrip their human mentors. They spent their time tidying up around the reef, gathering up plastic bags and bottles floating in the water, which they leave on the beach for their humans because they know that is what humans like to play with. Not all of their experiences in the year of the dolphin were uncomfortable. Some humans read to them. Books by Douglas Adams, for instance. What they liked was that dolphins were always portrayed as good, intelligent creatures, and they appreciated that. They are sorry that humans still only have legs to get about with and have not yet evolved flippers. They are grateful to young Tina. They observe and acknowledge the reverence that dolphins have been held in the past. You know, those pictures and sculptures. They hold the harbour and town of Poole in particular reverence. The fact that everywhere there are pictures and representations of dolphins. There are pottery likenesses made there and distributed throughout the world. Even park benches have dolphins carved into them. Yes, Poole will be forever after a sort of sacred place, although they will never have use for the park benches. They are not vengeful and bitter. They can see the future now, and they are grateful for the metaphorical leg up that has been provided by their interaction with the human race. They are generous in their thinking, but they will never allow a world ruled by dolphins to make the same mistakes as their predecessors. Well, thank you for listening to that tale from the cliff edge. Perhaps it'll make us all think before we get swept up into the latest Squid Game or Bitcoin craze. You might be pleased to know that next week's story will be number 50. It's the one where I originally said I'd finished. Well, not entirely. I might still put up a tale or two from time to time, just not on a weekly basis. Keep your eyes and ears open. But the really big news is that I'm going to release a sound project that I've been working on for the last 10 years. Yes, 10 years in the making, so please don't miss it. It's called Life and Death and Everything in Between. It's going to be really exciting. Meanwhile, I will see you next week for the last in the series of Tales from the Cliff Edge.